Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Meira Blaustein. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Woodstock Film Festival. And it gives me such great pleasure to welcome you to this particular event. I want to thank, first of all, our partners, Radio Kingston and um, Black History Month Kingston. Thank you very, very much for supporting this project, and Radio Kingston for supporting us throughout the year. Very much appreciated. And I would like to bring now the filmmaker, Yoruba Richen, if you can join us. And Yoruba is the director, and Lacey Schwartz Delgado, the executive producer. Hello, Lacey, can you join us, please? And Jessieca McNabb is going to be our moderator. Jessieca, could you join us? Hello, Jessieca. So nice to see you.
Hello, how are you today?
I'm good, I'm good. And hi, everyone. So I'm going to really just introduce Jessieca very, very briefly. And Jessieca will introduce Yoruba and Lacey and take you into the whole conversation. Jessieca is a stand-up performer, and she also has a radio show on Radio Kingston. And she is a comedian, so we'll see how much humor she's going to be lacing into this conversation. I bet you that there's going to be quite a bit of it. But I'm very, very thrilled to have you, and I just want to say about both Yoruba and Lacey. They're both incredible filmmakers, and both of them independently have been part of the Woodstock Film Festival throughout the years as filmmakers, as jurors, as panelists. And I'm really, really thrilled to have you both together as you collaborated on this project together. So just a little bit of housekeeping rules for those of you in the audience. If you have any questions for Lacey or Yoruba or for Jessieca, write it into the chat, and Jessieca will do her best to get to that and present it to the speakers. And without further ado now, Jessieca, take it away.
Thank you very much. And thank you for this opportunity to be on this platform. And I'd like to welcome our audience on this discussion on this great film that's being presented by the Woodstock Film Festival, How It Feels to Be Free, Black Women Entertainers in the Civil Rights Movement. We welcome you all to this discussion with these two women that I have come to admire and be inspired by, Yoruba Richen and Lacey Schwartz Delgado. Hello, ladies. How are you tonight?
Good, good.
Hey, so it's great to be here with you.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to give the audience some quick information about you ladies, your background. There is not enough time because I've done a tremendous amount of research on you ladies in the last couple of weeks. And there is not enough time to list all your accolades and everything that you do. So we're just going to try to condense it down just a little bit. So Yoruba, you are the director. Yoruba Richen is an award-winning documentary filmmaker whose work has been featured on PBS, New York Times OpDoc, Frontline Digital, New York Magazine's website, The Cut, the Atlantic and Field of Vision. You see, I've only listed a few things. Look how many there are already. Her film, How It Feels to Be Free, premiered on PBS's American Masters in January of 2021. Her recent films, The New York Times Presents The Killing of Breonna Taylor, premiered on FX and Hulu, and The Sit-In. Harold Belafonte hosts The Tonight Show, premiered on MSNBC and is streaming on Peacock. Her previous film, The Green Book, Guide to Freedom, was broadcast on Smithsonian Channel and was nominated for an Emmy. Her films, The New Black and Promised Land, won multiple festival awards before airing on PBS's Independent Lens and POV. Yoruba won the Creative Promise Award at the Tribeca All Access and was a Sundance Producers Fellow. She is the 2016 recipient of the Chicken and Egg Breakthrough Filmmaker Award. And here's my comedy right here. The Guggenheim Fellow. Did I say that right? Guggenheim Fellow. Yoruba is I'm working on it. Yoruba is the founding director of documentary programming at the Craig Newmark Graduate School of Journalism at CUNY. Welcome, Yoruba. It is my honor to be on this panel with you.
Oh, I'm so happy to be in conversation with you.
Excellent. So you are the director of this film. Now we're going to talk about Miss Lacey Schwartz Delgado, who is one of the executive producers on this film. So executive producer Lacey Schwartz Delgado is an award-winning writer, director, producer, storyteller, and outreach strategist who uses the power of narratives to build community and impact change on a personal, familial, institutional, and societal levels. That's a lot of words for Jess. That got him right. Lacey's work stems from the belief that storytelling is one of the most powerful tools we can use to reclaim our sense of self and bridge societal divides. Her mission is to give voice to difficult truths that are widespread but rarely talked about to change the normative narrative. Lacey is best known for her writing, directing, and producing of her nationally and internationally recognized personal documentary, Little White Lie. Welcome, Lacey, and how are you this evening?
I'm great. It's so good to be in conversation with you and Yoruba, my favorite.
Oh, thank you. So you ladies have, first of all, audience, I hope that everyone viewed this film. If you haven't viewed this film, it will still be available on American Masters website until February 16th. So if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's worth watching it 2-3 times. I watched it. It was incredible. It's totally thought-provoking, and it adjusted my thinking about a lot of different things, and how these women that are featured in this film, change the course of civil rights and the voice of women and women of color in film in their own ways, in different ways, because some people were upset about the blaxploitation. They didn't think that was great. A lot of people like the more serious side of Lena Horne, signing the contract that she would not be a mammy or a maid, in her movie. She refused to do those. So those were her type of ways. So they all had different ways, and we'll get into that with you ladies. But first, let's just start off at the top. You ladies seem like you're great friends. I just want to know, how did you meet? How did you meet, and what brought you two together to make this film?
Well, how we met was we were both working on a film. And we met at a mentorship program run by Stanley Nelson, the great filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, the Firelight Media Lab. And I was working on my second film, The New Black, and Lacey was working on her film, Little White Lie, which you mentioned. And it's a great mentorship program for people of color to help, us get to the next level with our film, get it produced, get it out there. And we were both in that cohort. We became friends, and we just started talking about, I found out that Lacey has a production company, Truth Aid, and we just started talking about projects. I mean, I actually don't even really remember how initially we just started talking about projects, but I was talking about some ideas that I had, and we just had synergy in terms of working together. I landed upon this idea in 2014, which was probably like right after we ended the mentorship. We were, finished our mentorship program. But I read this book by Ruth Feldstein called How It Feels to Be Free, African-American Female Entertainers in the Civil Rights Movement. And I was immediately struck. I immediately thought it would make a good documentary because, as you alluded to, I was struck by how these women changed representation for Black women, both on screen and their political work on and off screen, and how their political work was about representation, and how they each built off of each other in terms of how far they were able to go, and set the stage for what we see today in terms of African-American female storytelling. So I thought it hit all these interesting themes that we didn't yet see in a documentary. And that's what struck me about the film. And I brought it to Lacey and Marette, her producing partner, and they immediately signed on, and that it's been our journey.
I think in a lot of ways it really goes to I mean, in a lot of ways it goes to the content of the film, but really for Marette, my business partner, who was first and foremost a very good friend of mine from graduate school, our relationship, our working relationship started from a friendship. It started from a place of mutual respect. And so as we started working on more and more projects, and for us, it was, you know, sometimes we direct, sometimes we write, sometimes we produce, depending on the project, this idea of when we met other people who we really had synergies with, who, again, we liked them first and foremost, but also respected them. I think that sometimes it's almost before the project, it's actually about the people for us. And that's a huge priority for us. And so, as Yoruba said, you know, when we were working on these mutual films, we would call each other all the time for advice or to talk through decisions or to try to decide on collaborators. And I was able to see very quickly that, you know, she was somebody that I both liked and respected. And so when so then I, of course, introduced her to Marette, and then it went from there. And so at first it was actually more about working with Yoruba than actually projects. And I think that will continue to be what it is. I mean, that being said, this project, as soon as she said, what do y'all think about this project? We were immediately sold. And I think it speaks to the exact same thing. I mean, even like, you know, the fact that a project can let us have conversations like this, talking to other kind of dope Black women about their creativity, about their stories, about their ups and downs, ins and outs. You know, for me, that's what I just want to do with my free time. So the idea of creating a film that really opens up that conversation in a way that is completely and totally nuanced was something that we were sold on from day one, and has been such a joy to work on and continues to be so.
Oh, I find it funny that you have free time because I have none of that.
She doesn't have free time.
So maybe later on you can send me an email on how do you get this unicorn that you have called free time. But
it's elusive.
Yeah, it is. It's very elusive, even time to sleep. So another question to both you ladies, and I'll start with you, Lacey. You know, I mean, you talked a little bit about what drives and influence you, but what drives you to like choose, you know, your projects? Like, I know you love working with Yoruba because it started out as a friendship, but when you do your other things and you do your outreaches and you write your stories, what drives you and influences you to make the decisions that this is what I want, this is the topic that I want to be on, you know, this is the topic that I want to put out into the public for people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, first and foremost, honestly, a lot of times it starts from what, you know, we personally connect to, right? What I'm just craving to hear or see more of, and I'm not seeing it out there. So it really, sometimes it comes from the vacuum of that. But then also, you know, the way we define our work is our company's called Truth Aid, talking about truths that are hard to talk about. We like, you know, to shine light on things, but we also like to get into the nitty gritty of things as well. And for us, I think in a lot of ways, the work is like the beginning of the conversation. So I think also looking at projects that really open up a conversation, doesn't close it down, right? And that there may be more than one viewpoint on it. And like you even brought it up, I mean, I think one of the things I love, there's a million things I love about this project. And every time I watch it, it's like I'm literally learning more about it, even though I've seen it a ton of times. Is what I love about this project is exactly what you're saying. Like with Lena Horne is a perfect example. Like she talked about the struggle to get into the industry, but then she also talked about like how she was perceived as being light-skinned and getting certain roles that other people weren't getting, you know? So there's like a lot of times there's two sides to many coins. And I love how, you know, projects that open that up doesn't close down the conversation, but opens it up in a really interesting way.
I found it. Oh, go ahead.
No. You go ahead.
I was just because she was talking about Lena Horne. I found it interesting that when she was talking, how they unscripted her and turned her. I thought that was a way that they were trying to silence her when they unscripted her and made her more of a singer than, you know, an actress and being able to use all of her gifts. And I was just wondering, you know, kind of how you felt about that. Like, I felt like they were quieting her down because she was getting ready to speak too much. I mean, they put her on they blacklisted her on the communist list, you know, as she was just because of who she was associated with and friends with. So I thought that was a real interesting part, and kind of turned her career in a different way that she wasn't expecting, but she still rose above it and, you know, did what she had to do.
And it's Lena Horne. Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's important to remember, and, you know, obviously we talk about this in film, what had just been the most, and I think still is by the standards, you know, economic standards of the time, the most successful movie of all time, Gone with the Wind, came out in 1939, right? Lena signs her contract in 1940, 41, 42. So that's what we're dealing with. I mean, that's what she's dealing with. She's dealing with these stereotypes and these imagery of Black women that were the foundation of Hollywood, is what Hollywood was built upon, right? So the fact that she signs this contract that's groundbreaking, you know, and we go into a little bit some of the reasons why the Hollywood might have, you know, the Hollywood brass might have accepted it. You know, we had just come back, we were from World War II, we were demanding more rights, you know, things where, and we see that through the progression of the film, right? How the politics affect what Hollywood allows us to do. So she signs this contract, groundbreaking, refuses to play a maid. One of the things I think is so interesting is that she also got backlash from the Black actors at the time who were playing those roles, who were like, well, if she doesn't play those roles and refuse to do it, well, what are we, you know, we might not be any more roles for us. But at the same time, of course, they don't know what to do with her because they have not expanded opportunity for Black actresses. And so she only gets 2 speaking roles, and she is put in these roles as a singer. She's also you know, she talks about being she was cut out of the roles in the South because the South was the biggest market. And, you know, one in particular that she talks about in Cabin in the Sky, in this bubble bath scene, right? Where she's totally sexy, gorgeous. You know, there's no way they could allow that to happen because here you have this Black woman who's, you know, sexual and sexy and, you know, against all the norms of the day. So she still is, you know, a groundbreaker, one of our biggest, you know, stars. And, you know, precisely because she didn't take those roles and did not demean herself. So Lena Horne is a real trailblazer that really, I think, sets the stage for African-American actresses that come after her.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, she definitely set the pace for, you know, Cicely Tyson to be able to choose, you know, the type of roles that she played. And I loved how in the film Cicely Tyson, she just would not settle. You know, she wanted to be portrayed in a certain way to the public and to show, you know, like her and Diahann Carroll also wanted to show ways that Black women could be, but weren't being portrayed as smart, as, you know, as intelligent, as beautiful as they were, and not, you know, trying to assimilate to a certain type of person, a certain type of woman that they felt like was beautiful. So, you know, what are both of you guys' thoughts on, you know, like Cicely Tyson? We could go on about this. And Nina Simone also came in on that, and she was just revolutionary and political, and they just were not ready for her yet. And I can imagine that somebody was looking for some tape to put over her mouth and shut her down, but they just couldn't, because what she was saying was so powerful, and to be able to be, you know, that political. I don't know if I lost you guys in where I was talking right there, but, you know, feel free to jump in and talk about any of those women, you know, in the film, and how, because I just love how they just stack on each other and piggyback off of each other and continue, you know, each other's work.
Totally. And Yoruba, I want to let you speak on this, but one of the things that has really been interesting to me also is how many people have said to me, in particular around Nina Simone, that they didn't realize she was that political. And that is really shocking to me because, you know, in a lot of ways, I mean, I guess I'm more familiar, but that's who I think of her as. And so it just shows me that there is actually but I guess I've dug deeper in a variety of different ways. And that it just shows me that there was an ability for some of these women's careers to actually come out, but only in the end, it was only a portion of it, right? Like people only saw them through a certain lens, that actually part of, you could argue, the core of who they were wasn't actually going mainstream. And so they were being, kind of placed in a certain role and not able to fully be who they were. One of the things I think really struck us when we were making this film is that how little, there are a few, I wouldn't say there's always enough, but there are a few, Black men whose performers who have been very much like spoke about their political and their activist lives, and that for women, a lot of times it just hasn't been focused on. And obviously, when we go back and we look at like the civil rights movement, we obviously know how women were not heralded as they should have been, even though they had very strong roles within the movement. But it really hasn't been focused on nearly as much as I think any of us need to. And for these women especially, and you're seeing, one of the things I love about this project also is like, it's all the things, right? It's identity. I mean, those scenes with like talking about Cicely Tyson and her hair, and what the statements are that she's making with her hair and how much of a statement that is. I mean, the idea that you can be an activist through your image, through the roles you choose, not only what you say or what you show up to, but actually your mere presence is activism, was pretty incredible to me.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to the motivation of why this film. I also have had people say to me, they'd never seen Nina, understood how political Nina was and how that was so infused in her work. And I think it says something too about the kind of, there's been a frustration that I've had about documentaries, especially about our people, that focus on the tragedy, the biographical, quote unquote, tragedy, and don't focus enough, in my opinion, on their impact. And that's really what I wanted to do with this film. So it's not, I always said from the beginning, this is, it's not a biographical film. We're not doing birth to deaths of these women, but we're really looking at their impact, their influence, and how they changed the game for Black female representation. And so I think when you are able to focus in on Nina's work and what she's saying, you get a different view of who she is or who she was as an artist.
That is so true, so true. And I don't want to leave out talking about Abbey Lincoln also, because Abbey Lincoln, if I'm thinking correctly, I'm trying to get my time framing. She's before,
that's right,
Cicely Tyson and all
and
that.
Before Nina.
Okay, so she was the one that actually, started making. She didn't want to be that image that they had made her. She talked about wearing the dress from the Marilyn Monroe movie, and I thought it was funny how the guy was like, she said, I threw that thing in the furnace because I don't want to wear anybody's hand-me-downs, but to change her image and to go with her natural, people got on her for that, and that in itself was a political statement being made. What do you ladies think about?
And it's not just, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Abbey Lincoln, I learned so much about Abbey making this film, and how she was really, in some ways, a precursor to Nina in terms of her political lyrics, the political lyrics that she sang in her work and the transformation of going natural. And then, both Nina and Abbey, it wasn't just the backlash they got from white people, but they got it from Black people as well. So again, we see how all of these women, though they're fighting, these institutional racism and the racism of in their field, but they're also having to push back against their own people as well.
Yeah, and I think that probably a lot of pushback came because we were, trying to assimilate and trying to fall into, the structure of what people thought was beautiful and trying to be accepted by society on white society's terms. I mean, let's say what it is. And it just, it just wasn't fair. It just wasn't fair. And I just love the fact that these women, they took hits in their career. They took hits in their pockets, you know, to be able to be a voice that we are all able to sit down right now and have this discussion and you know, keep it going. So
no, totally. I just want to add one other moment to it. Sorry, just to say, like, you know, one of the moments I love is Diahann Carroll when she's sitting in that interview and I can't remember who's interviewing her, Yoruba, the woman. She's saying, you know, why have you broken through? And Diahann, in her like completely elegant way, says, you know, I think it's because, like, in certain ways I conform to certain standards of beauty, but that's pretty much, she's saying it's wrong and that it shouldn't be that way. And so these so many moments in the film where to see these women call out and actually put a lens on what is actually wrong sometimes with some of the success that even moves them, whether or not it's about the color of their skin, their features, and how that conforms to white standards of beauty norms, and whether that they're encouraging the pushback. I mean, even like I love, and one of the things I also love about how the film does it is like how it goes through with Diahann, what, you know, even when you look at Julia, right, and Julia being so historic, the fact that until Kerry Washington really, you know, there had been very few, if not any, network shows starring a Black woman from Julia to, I think there was one more in between, right? But anyway, right? There's one more in between.
Get Christy Love.
Right. Yeah. But so it's like pretty much Julia to Scandal, you have this entire gap. But at the same time, you know, showing those clips of Diahann Carroll dealing with the criticism, you know, the reading of those letters saying, you know, you're not really Black. I mean, just getting into what the ins and outs are for performers and what the decisions they make. I love that about the film and how the film goes through those complexities.
Yeah, and
yes, I just have to say, you know, the Diahann, I'm so happy I got to interview her and we got to meet her before she passed. Lacey, do you want to talk a little bit about how that came about?
Yeah, that would be great.
I always say, you know, I'm like amazed at our tenacity in getting that.
That was tenacity. We had, long story short, a friend in common with Diahann. And it was kind of, I think she was still working a bit, but we had found out she was at the beginning of being sick, and it was kind of unclear with what she was going to do, et cetera. And somehow or another, we just kept on calling her.
And she would talk to us.
And she would talk to us on the phone. I would just check in with her. And so all of a sudden, you know,
just checking in with Diahann Carroll.
It's not a cell phone, you know, it's not a cell phone. I'm calling a landline, you know, talking to whoever's working at home, and then getting on the phone with Diahann and just talking to her. And, you know, but she was hesitant about the interview. And finally she agreed to go to dinner. I was going to be in LA. And I said, I'm going to be in Los Angeles. Can I at least meet you? No cameras. And so I had the opportunity to have dinner with Diahann Carroll at the Beverly Hills Hilton. And it was such a Hollywood moment of which I don't think barely exists anymore. We're sitting outside in like a cabana by the pool, and it's 3 hours. Because part of the thing is like once you could get her and she would start talking, she liked to talk, which was incredible. And she had so many stories. And obviously at this moment we didn't have a camera. And so I just got to sit there for 3 hours drinking wine with Diahann Carroll. And then afterwards I thought, this is it. And then it took 2 more years to get that interview, but we finally got it. And she was so beautiful.
Yeah.
She just remembered all the stories and all the reflections that interview. And it was really one of the last interviews she ever gave before she passed away. I mean, the crazy thing is when we started making this film, you know, both Diahann and Cicely were obviously still with us. And the fact that Cicely passed away a week after the film came out. So pretty remarkable. Legends.
That must have been amazing. I would have been starstruck. I'd have been there with my mouth open, and she would have been like, "Girl, close your mouth."
She would have. And she was so funny and just really, really generous. And it was a pleasure getting to interview her. It really was.
I just love how the genuineness of all these women, just permeates the screen, and it just goes just so far beyond. It's almost like you're sitting with them all the time when they're talking. That's how I felt with this film, that I was just sitting in the room with them, having these great conversations.
Yeah, and Pam Grier was also like that too. She was so, you know, again, very generous, great to talk with, great talker, great stories. So we were, you know, we were really lucky.
Yeah, and I, the thing that tied me, for me, what tied Pam Grier and Diahann Carroll together is that they both wanted to be portrayed as powerful women that didn't take any crap. And I'm saying that about Diahann Carroll because of her role in Dynasty. And in the interview, she was like, you know, I've seen these women, they were rich, they were powerful, they were nasty, they were bitchy. And I was like, that's what I want to do. I can be all those things. And I mean, one of the most famous scenes is when she slaps. I forget what her name is, but she slapped
Joan Collins.
She slapped the taste out of her mouth.
People always ask me like what, you know, because obviously there's things that you can't include in the film. And I really wanted to include more Dynasty footage. If I could, if I'd had my way. It's just so delicious.
I think for my February plan, I've decided is I'm going to go back and binge Dynasty.
Yeah.
You know, because I watched it kind of like, I watched it, but like more piecemeal growing up with my grandmother. But now I'm going to go back and binge it from the top because it's so.
Now you can understand everything that they're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, and what's really going on.
So good.
So,
and I love it, you know, related to that, I love when Lena Waithe says, you know, when we tell our stories, we can be the heroes and the villains.
That's right.
Yeah. You know, and that part is so good. You know, because I think that's what, when you look at the, you know, the breadth of these women, what you see is all different kinds of Blackness, right? All different kinds of being a woman. There's not just one way. It's like we can be it all. And it's not about the perfection or the tearing down. It's just about like, this is what humanity is. And I think that, you know, and that's in a lot of ways what freedom is, right? The freedom to make mistakes, the freedom to do what you want to do. And I love that.
And I love that we're seeing now, you know, with creators like Lena Waithe, who's so incredible to me. I mean, even before I got to interview her, I watched all of her stuff.
Yes.
You know, to be able to we're seeing that freedom. You know, we see from Lena Horne, you know, not being able to have the career that she wants, to somebody like Lena Waithe and others who are creating these roles. I mean, it's granted, there's, you know, and we say this in the film, there's still we still have a long way to go, but, you know, the plethora of stories and of Black storytelling, Black female creators we're seeing today is really wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm feeling like the next go round of this kind of film documentary should feature these ladies: Lena Waithe, Halle Berry, Alicia Keys, Issa Rae, Ava DuVernay. I mean, they're, along with you two, they're the future, and there's so many women that are out here. But I think that my question is about like funding. Like it seems like it's hard to get funding. I know it took you ladies almost 2 years to get the funding.
More than that.
What do you think that I mean, I have ideas, but what do you think the reasons are behind the slow funding for these projects?
Well, you know, I think it's hard to fund you know, getting funding is hard just in general. I mean, it is no matter what, you know, what kind of film that you're doing. I think that when, you know, despite all of the sort of, as I just said, the plethora in Black storytelling that we see, we still don't have the gatekeepers who are at the helm who can help fund our stories in a way that can, you know, that it doesn't have to take 5 years. Now, I have to say, we had buy-in from American Masters very early, and from the PBS world, which is American Masters, ITVS, which is an arm of PBS that funds filmmakers. We've been supported by them before, by Black Public Media, which has funded every project, every film that I've ever done. It supported me. And it's because they recognize, you know, what these films are, the importance of them, and how they need to get out there. So that, I think, we need more people who look like us, who can greenlight and fund projects, and it is still hard. And historical films are difficult, I think, just in general, but it's even a bigger hurdle when it's, you know, our history. And we want to tell it, quite frankly, because other people have been telling our history in documentary film for a long time. It seems to be more of a challenge when we are telling our own history.
Yes, that's definitely true. Lacey, would you like to speak on that?
Truth. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting point about who's telling it. I mean, I think that there's a whole thing within, you know, who gets funded and whether or not I mean, a lot of this comes down to, you know, you and I have done a bunch of work with PBS, which is not about the bottom line in that same way. You know, there were many times over the 5-6 years that we were working on this project that we pursued a lot of different, sometimes honestly public and private partnerships, and there was a lot of opportunities. But to tell the story the way we wanted to tell it, we knew from the beginning American Masters was incredibly supported by PBS was. But the idea of like the bottom line and what kind of programs can people justify for their bottom line? You know, will, you know, certain audiences watch certain films about certain kinds of people told in certain ways. And I think that a lot of that is influenced, you know, just, you know, every time that there's a film that does well, then all of a sudden people are like, oh, there's actually an audience. And you don't realize there's always an audience. And I think sometimes one of the things also people don't realize is like, we know how to meet our own audience as well. And I think for filmmakers, we've more and more especially over the last decade, had to be able to deliver on that, how to know how to speak to our audience in a way that will really connect for them. And if we get the right, you know, so it's not just about the funding, but it's also about the marketing, you know, and whether or not, you know, films are going to be pushed out in the same way. You know, and listen, the world is changing in a lot of ways. And so, you know, streamers have obviously taken over in a big way. And so we are starting to see more of that content because, you know, with it not just being so much about like just box office revenue, there's a whole other counter of how films are getting made. And I think that that's also actually helping. But to Yoruba's point, you know, they too have to have a serious responsibility, especially to understand how to reach those markets. And we all know everybody's on Netflix and everybody's on Amazon Prime. Like everybody's watching those things. Everyone is. And it's not just in, you know, like I love the attention we've seen in the last, 8 months. Literally, I mean, all of a sudden, I mean, I'll never forget like turning on the TV right on Juneteenth weekend and being like, almost you're like, what is that? Like, it's like black in use across like every single thing. And it was almost like disconcerting because all of a sudden, you know, as opposed to like now, right? It's like usually, oh, it's like, let's push our Black history content out. And, you know, and all of a sudden that was like, oh, the second, which is the Juneteenth content came really strong. And even now, I don't know exactly what Netflix calls it, but there is a way in which there is still a marginalization of that content, even in this moment, that I think we need to like continue to push forward these stories that like this is considered mainstream and this is like a subgenre. Yeah. And, you know, we've come a long way. I mean, you know, look at people like us. I mean, the idea of like urban films, right? Urban music, which is like code for Black. Well, what about people who don't live in urban areas? Right. You know, there's almost this idea of that's what it's supposed to be. And that I think we all really support the pushing back of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, there's been a lot of panels and talks and things that we've all, you know, that both Lacey and I and others have taken part in about diversity and inclusion and who can tell what story. And for me, you know, we can get into this whole debate about, you know, who is authentic and can tell who's allowed to tell what story. And I mean, I certainly think that, you know, historically, as I said, our stories have not been told by us. So we need to have, you know, a period of time where we're only telling our stories. However, I do think that, you know, it's not just about, you know, having Black storytellers tell Black stories, but also, you know, the lens of which we are looking at things. So when you do have a white story telling a story of a person of color, which, you know, still happens, there has to be, there should be, you know, certain the funders, the broadcasters should ensure that there's a diverse crew, that there's people on the team who can help, you know, that filmmaker understand, you know, that point of view and that lived experience. I mean, there are things, real things that can be done so that it doesn't have to be this, oh, well, you just can't tell our story. And then we start fighting about it, you know, on Facebook or something.
Right.
There's real things that can happen to ensure that inclusion, you know, is real from the director on down to, you know, the full on crew.
Right.
You know, an example I felt like of that, where I feel like I saw that, and, you know, listen, I can't speak, I haven't like deep dove how perfectly it was done, so I could see people saying like, oh, it could have been better or whatever, but I did think that with Watchmen, like it felt like that was an example of somebody who was even publicly, like at the Emmys, very publicly still doing the work, right? Still being like, at like Damon Lindelof as a white man who's obviously had quite a bit of success, right? So he is getting, you know, so we can get into like, okay, why is he successful and other people aren't, whatever, but who has done a lot of great programs and has that platform, you know, got a, you know, Marvel project. And then when he wanted to tell like a different history, had to figure out how to do that and how to really raise people up at all levels. And I feel even at the Emmys, when he was giving a speech, was speaking to that, right? Was speaking to the fact that like he has to learn from other people. And so I think in a lot of ways, even that kind of intentionality over like, even when something is successful, it's not like, oh, I just nailed this, and so now I can speak on it. It's actually still having the ability to pull through. And let's be honest, like we're seeing that left and right now. I mean, right. There are projects that there is no question that up until this year would have gotten done with the same old white directors or producers or whoever. And now people are definitely having this moment. I mean, I'm getting the calls, Yoruba's getting the calls, everybody's getting the calls when there's clearly a moment where they say they're sitting in that room, they're moving forward with the project, and all of a sudden they're saying, pause, look around, this isn't right. And they are making those calls. So I think for people like us, we can kind of almost at times giggle about that and say, you know, that's funny that it even got that far without us. Mm-hmm. But what I will say is before it wasn't stopping. And there are some films coming out that I won't even name, but you can see that in who are like co-directing it together, right? There are people who have in the past would have just kept on pushing on, and they are now pausing and saying, we better bring somebody else in. And I'll say is, you know, however we feel about it, it is making a difference. And it is making a change, both in the content and also the exposure for a lot of people of color's careers.
Yeah. And if time flies, ladies. But I want to try to get this last question in, just because it's such a hot topic right now, intersectionality. How, you know, do you felt like your films, you know, intersect everything, political, women issues, LGBTQ issues? I mean, how do you feel about, you know, trying to put all those things together and cross these paths to, you know, make it inclusive for everyone that is watching your documentaries and your films?
Well, I think some of it is just instinctual as a person who lives in intersectionality. You know, I think that's kind of how, again, the lens of which I see things, right? So I think that's one thing, and that just drives my narrative storytelling. But it also depends on the project too, right? So in The New Black, for example, I looked at that film was about the African American community and grappling with the LGBTQ marriage equality issue, and looking at the sort of intersection of African civil rights and LGBTQ rights. So real intersectionality there. This film, these are Black women entertainers who are political, who are fighting these institutional, you know, racism in their own industry and in society. So another kind of intersectionality. So I think it really, it's the things that I'm attracted to, the sort of multiple ways of how we experience, you know, of our experience in this country, the complexity of African Americans, And, you know, there's so many stories to be told. I was just on a panel the other night and I was, you know, there are so many great stories to be told. It's just like a plethora. I was asked if it was a burden, you know, to have to represent and to, you know, our stories and to, and our history. And it's like, it's a pleasure, you know, to be able to tell our stories and bring these stories forth. And they're intersectional, they're nuanced, they're exciting, they're celebratory. So yeah, I think it's just what I'm attracted to as a filmmaker.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say your questions are amazing.
Oh,
really, really thoughtful. So thank you. They're really, really great. You know, and yeah, I mean, I think Yoruba already said it really, really well. And I think that it's just, I think in a lot of ways it's who we naturally are. You know, I think that, you know, so Moret is Ethiopian and lives in Ethiopia probably 75% of the time. So there's also a way in which, you know, part of it is just, you know, when you're not just living in a world where certain norms are reinforced all the time, you know, it makes it way easier. Like, and it's funny because, like, although intersectionality is an incredibly important word and an incredibly important concept, for some of us, that's just actually our natural habitat, right?
Exactly.
And I, you know, and just being aware of how other people are not all like you. You know, I go into spaces all the time, mostly for screenings or when I give talks and stuff, where I'm always like, oh, right, y'all are like in a bubble commuting with yourselves, you know. And I think for me, I think it's not like, this is for me the glory of life, is to be exposed to lots and lots of things, and to myself be a totality of many things, my family to be even a bigger totality of all those things. And then when you get to my friendship circles, my collaborators, it's like we're all over the place in this way that you just can't go into a space and speak for the we and make assumptions. You know, I always say, I'm a proud graduate of Kingston High School, and I spoke for commencement a couple of years ago, and you know, talked about the fact that, like, the only thing we all have in common is that we frequently don't feel like we belong. You know, I mean, that's what we have in common, is how different we all feel. So we find things to bond over, but we then also have to represent all these different pieces. And I think in a lot of ways, that is, you know, to me, what the natural thing is. Like, if I'm just assuming like, oh, that's how it is for all of us, like, chances are I have no idea what I'm talking about, and I don't know what somebody else's experience is like.
This has been my absolute pleasure, ladies. I just wish we could just go on and on. This conversation.
Next time.
So, you know, definitely to everyone in the audience, if you haven't watched How It Feels to Be Free, it's streaming for free on PBS American Masters until February 16th. I'm telling you right now, you're missing it if you are not watching it, and you're missing everything. Once you go into that, just Google these ladies and just look at absolutely everything they do, because I am still after this going to be researching you, and I hope that I'm able to come into this circle again with you and talk again. It's been my absolute pleasure.
Thank you
as well.
So much.
And we would like to also thank the Woodstock Film Festival, as well as Radio Kingston, for providing us this platform for this discussion. You know, and I have to, like I said, thank you, Yoruba and Lacey, you know, for joining us, taking the time out of your day to join us to have this most important, you know, conversations. And like I said, I'm going to say it again because I want everybody to watch this American Masters website. This is going to be on there until February 16th. How It Feels to Be Free. Read the book, watch the movie, and follow these ladies, because I just can't wait to see what you ladies have coming up next. Thank you very much. And also I'd like to thank Miera Blaustein. Am I saying her name correctly? Because it's so beautiful. For inviting us here and, you know, trusting us with this topic. And it's been my absolute pleasure. I hope everyone has a great night tonight, and keep continuing the good fight and keep moving forward. And let's keep on creating this unity that we have going on here.
Woo-hoo.
Thank you, ladies.
Love
Bye,
that.
guys.
Thank you. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Bye, girl.
Bye.
Bye-bye.